Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this 8th video of the playlist, we'll talk about Freud's thoughts on being in love and hypnosis. So grab your coffee and let's begin. Even at its most whimsical linguistic usage remains true to some kind of reality. For instance, although it describes as love a wide variety of emotional relationships that we too, theoretically, group together as love, it questions whether that love is in fact the real, true, proper thing, thus indicating a whole hierarchy of possibilities within the love phenomenon. Nor do we have any difficulty in finding the same in observation. In a series of cases, being in love is simply object charging on the part of the sex drives for the purpose of direct sexual satisfaction. In fact, it dies once it has achieved that goal. That is what is referred to as ordinary sensual love. However, as we know, the libidinal situation seldom remains so simple. The certainty with which the need that had just died could be expected to revive must presumably have been the immediate motive for endowing the sex object with a permanent charge, casting it in a permanent role, and loving it even during the lust-free interludes. From the very remarkable developmental history of the human love life, there stems a second factor. In the first stage, usually complete by the age of 5, the child had found in one parent an initial love object on which all its sex drives, thirsting for satisfaction, had focused. The repression that then supervened forced the child to renounce most of those childish sexual goals and left behind a far-reaching modification of the child's relationship to its parents. The child remained attached to its parents, but with drives that have to be called goal-inhibited. The feelings that the child henceforth experiences for these loved persons are described as affectionate. The earlier sensual tendencies are known to remain more or less strongly preserved in the unconscious, with the result that, in a sense, the original full current continues to exist. We know that with puberty, fresh and very powerful tendencies towards direct sexual goals set in. In untoward cases, they remain as a sensual current, divorced from the continuing, affectionate emotional trends. One is then faced with the image whose twin aspects are so readily idealized by certain schools of thought in the literature. The man shows infatuated leanings towards highly respected women who, however, do not attract him sexually. He is potent only towards other women whom he does not love, indeed whom he thinks little of or even despises. More often, though, the growing youth achieves a degree of synthesis of non-sensual or heavenly and sensual or earthly love, while his relationship to his sex object is characterized by a combination of uninhibited and goal-inhibited drives. Depending on the contribution of the goal-inhibited affection drives, it is possible to gauge the extent of being in love as opposed to merely sensual desire. In connection with this kind of being in love, our attention was drawn from the outset to the phenomenon of sexual overestimation. The fact that the loved object enjoys a certain freedom from criticism, with all that object's qualities being valued more highly than those of unloved persons, or than at a time when it was not loved. Even partially effective repression or reduction of sensual tendencies gives rise to the illusion that it is because of the object's mental merits that it is also loved sensually, whereas in fact, the reverse is the case. It was sensual attraction that contrived to bestow those merits on the object in the first place. The striving that skews judgment here is that of idealization. But this makes it easier for us to find our bearings. We know that the object is treated in the same way as the person's own I. In other words, that in the condition of being in love, a great deal of narcissistic libido overflows onto the object. In some forms of love choice, it is even strikingly obvious that the purpose of the object is to take the place of a person's own unattained I ideal. The object is loved because of the perfections that a person has striven after for his own I, and now seeks to acquire in this roundabout way in order to satisfy his narcissism. If sexual overestimation and the condition of being in love attain even greater proportions, interpreting the image becomes less and less ambiguous. The tendencies pushing the person towards direct sexual satisfaction can now be repressed completely, as, for example, happens regularly in the case of youthful infatuation. The I becomes less and less demanding, the object increasingly splendid and more precious. Eventually, the object acquires the whole of the self-love of the I, with the result that the latter's self-sacrifice becomes a natural consequence. The object has, as it were, consumed the I. Elements of humility, reduced narcissism, and self-harm are present in every case of being in love. In extreme cases, they are merely intensified, and as a result of the withdrawal of sensual demands, they alone remain paramount. This is especially readily the case in connection with unhappy, unfulfillable love, since with each sexual satisfaction what happens is that sexual overestimation suffers a further demotion. At the same time as this self-abandonment of the I to the object, which is in fact indistinguishable from sublimated self-abandonment to an abstract idea, the functions assigned to the I ideal fail completely. The criticism normally exercised by this agency falls silent. Everything the object does and demands is correct and beyond reproach. Conscience is not applied to any occurrence that favors the object. In the blindness of love, the lover becomes an unrepentant criminal. The whole situation can be summed up neatly in the sentence: the object has usurped the place of the I ideal. The difference between identification and the condition of being in love in its highest forms, called fascination or amorous dependence, is now easy to describe. In the former case, the I has enriched itself with the qualities of the object. To use Ferenczi's expression, it has introjected the object into itself. In the latter case, the I has become poorer. It has abandoned itself to the object, setting the object in place of its most important constituent. However, closer examination shows that this account erects sham opposites that do not in fact exist. We are not talking about impoverishment or enrichment in economic terms. The condition of being deeply in love can also be described as the I having introjected the object into itself. It may be that another distinction comes closer to the essence here. In the case of identification, the object had become lost or been given up. It is then reinstated in the I, with the I undergoing a partial change, modeling itself on the lost object. In the other case, the object is preserved and is as such overcharged by and at the expense of the I. But in this respect, too, there is some doubt. If it is established that identification presupposes the relinquishment of object charging, can there be no identification where the object is preserved? And before we allow ourselves to become involved in debating this delicate question, it may already have dawned on us that another alternative captures the essence of this situation, namely whether the object is set in place of the I or of the I ideal. From being in love, it is clearly not a big step to hypnosis. The correspondences between the two are obvious. The same humble subjection, submissiveness, uncritical acceptance of hypnotist and loved object alike. The same soaking up of personal initiative. Evidently, the hypnotist has taken the place of the I ideal. In hypnosis, all relationships only become clearer and more intense. So it would make more sense to explain being in love in terms of hypnosis than the other way around. The hypnotist is the sole object. No other object, apart from the hypnotist, receives any attention. The fact that the I experiences the hypnotist's demands and assertions in a dreamlike state reminds us that we neglected to mention keeping a check on reality as being one of the functions of the I ideal. No wonder the I deems a perception to be real if the psychical agency charged with the task of examining reality lends its support to that reality. The total absence of tendencies with uninhibited sexual goals further contributes to the extreme purity of the phenomena associated with hypnosis. The hypnotic relationship is an unrestricted amorous surrender that excludes sexual satisfaction, whereas in the condition of being in love, such satisfaction is only provisionally deferred and remains in the background as a future potential goal. On the other hand, we can also say that the hypnotic relationship is, if the expression will be permitted, the formation of a mass of two. Hypnosis offers a good comparison with mass formation, being actually identical with the latter. From the complicated structure of the mass, it isolates one element for us, namely the behavior of the mass individual towards the leader. This numerical restriction distinguishes hypnosis from mass formation, just as the absence of directly sexual tendencies distinguishes it from the condition of being in love. In that respect, it occupies the middle ground between the two. Interestingly, it is precisely such goal-inhibited sexual tendencies that achieve lasting attachments between people. This is easily explained, however, by the fact that they are incapable of complete satisfaction, whereas uninhibited sexual tendencies find themselves extraordinarily reduced as a result of their removal in the wake of each attainment of the sexual goal. Sensual love is destined to expire in satisfaction. To be capable of lasting, it must from the outset have been mixed with purely affectionate, i.e., goal-inhibited constituents, or it must undergo such a conversion. Hypnosis would provide us with a smooth solution to the riddle of the libidinal constitution of a mass, if it did not itself still contain features that elude the rational explanation offered so far, namely that it is like the condition of being in love but with the directly sexual tendencies excluded. Much about it must still be acknowledged as being not understood, as being mysterious. It contains an admixture of paralysis from the relationship of a superior to a powerless inferior, which links up with the fright hypnosis of animals, for instance. The manner in which it is engendered and how it relates to sleep are both obscure, and the puzzling selection of persons who make suitable subjects, while others reject it completely, points to a factor as yet unknown that becomes effective through it, and is perhaps what allows libido attitudes within it to be so pure. Another remarkable feature is the way the moral conscience of the hypnotized person may often prove resistant, even where the person is otherwise wholly suggestible and submissive. However, that may be due to the fact that in hypnosis as usually practiced, an awareness may be retained that this is only a game, an unreal reproduction of a different situation, one of very much greater vital significance. Our discussions hitherto, however, have fully prepared us to set out the formula for the libidinal constitution of the mass, at least of the kind of mass we have been considering up to now. In other words, one that has a leader and has not been able to acquire secondarily the properties of an individual as a result of having too much organization. Such a primary mass is a number of individuals who have set one and the same object in place of their I ideal, and who have consequently identified with one another in terms of their I. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check the books available in our link in the description. There you'll find many fundamental marketing books in different languages. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more psychology-related content. See you in the next one.